All right, so the first question that we have, if you don't know how this works, over at beginnerphotopod.com/QA, you can, on top of leaving me an email, you can leave me a voicemail. Voicemails are always going to get priority here on these Q&A episodes because, for one, it's fun. We get to learn a little bit more about who you are, and it's just more immersive that way. It's more enjoyable to hear somebody else's voice than just hear me reading an email of somebody else's question. So the first question that we got today comes from Reed. Let's hear Reed's question.
I enjoy your podcast very much. I have a quick question. Taking a trip and want to know if you shoot in JPEG, can you edit the JPEG pictures or must you shoot in RAW in order to edit pictures?
All right, Reed. So great question. This is one that I've heard many times before. When it comes to editing your photos, especially when you're going on a trip, you want to bring your camera so that you can capture that trip as you experience it. And then two, you kind of want to edit those photos so that you can highlight all the fun aspects of the trip and make it something really memorable, something unique and uniquely your own as well. And we do that through editing our photos. So within photography, there's a lot of talk about RAW versus JPEG and, editing in RAW and all this stuff. So let me lay it out for you clearly, all right? In the world of photography, there's a lot of talk about editing RAW photos and how RAW photos are so much better than JPEG images. And I'm here to tell you that is somewhat true. I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years ago, when we were kind of in the early days of digital photography, JPEG files were, imagine them like a print, like a film print. When the print came out, the photo was done, right? There was some flexibility that you had when you were developing the film to get the print the way that you wanted it to. But once you got to the print, it was kind of done. JPEG is just the easiest way to share photos on the internet. So there was a version of JPEG that was essentially, for all intents and purposes, done. Now, you could bring that JPEG image into a photo editor and adjust things like exposure, contrast, shadows, highlights, color, things like that. But there wasn't a lot of information to play with. So because of that, the images looked pretty bad when you would edit a JPEG image. On the other hand, a RAW file is all of the information that your camera sensor collects about light as you're taking a photo. And therefore, there's just more information for you to be able to bring out in an edit. So for a long time, RAW was looked at as like, if you're not shooting RAW, you're definitely not a professional photographer, because this is just the only option for flexibility in getting an image that it is that you want. Well, over the past 10, 12, 15 years, JPEG files have progressed so much, like a ton, right? Oh, and I guess I should go back to the downsides of RAW. The downside of RAW is that since it's all the information that comes out of your camera, it is a huge file. It is considerably larger than a JPEG file. And because you can't just share a RAW on the internet, it requires you to edit it before exporting it, before it can be shared. So there's a little bit of friction there, right? However, if you know that you need to edit an image, or you're going to edit all of your images anyway, then that's the price that you pay. So again, fast forward 10, 12, 15 years, JPEG files have become much, much, much better than they were in the past. And RAW files are better, but that's because sensors have gotten better, I suppose, to the point to where now I believe that shooting in RAW is actually overkill for 99% of photographers. And unless you are shooting in extremely difficult lighting conditions and the stakes are extremely high, then editing in RAW, or you just really like to edit your images, then I don't see a need to edit in RAW. In fact, the other day, I went out to do an early morning photo walk. So there was lots of contrast because the sun was very low in the sky. So there were some very bright highlights, as well as some very dark shadow areas that just hadn't been hit by the sun yet. And there was one photo that I took that actually, it must have been an accident, but when I brought it in to Lightroom, it was very dark, extremely dark. So not knowing what the photo was, I raised up the exposure to see what it was real quick. And I raised it up the entire 5 stops that Lightroom allowed me to do. And the photo looked great. In fact, I wish that I had more flexibility. I wish that I had more stops available within Lightroom to be able to increase the exposure further, because even at 5 stops, it still looked great. And if you're shooting an image and you're 5 stops off, well, then that's your fault, right? Then there's just a lot that you need to work on in your own photography that editing isn't going to help you with in terms of being a photographer. I see shooting in RAW almost as an insurance policy, or if that is your style of photography, that your images have a lot of editing done to them, right? Things like compositions or multiple exposures that you're bringing into, say, Photoshop or something. Otherwise, I shoot all of my images in JPEG. I haven't shot RAW in, I don't know, 2.5 years now, I suppose. And I have not once ran into a situation where I thought, man, if I shot in RAW, I wouldn't have ruined this entire day's worth of shooting. So I would encourage you to, I guess, to directly answer your question, yes, you can edit JPEG images. And what's better is that if, say, there's an image that you like the way that it is, now you can share it right away without having to do any sort of edits and then export and then upload it to whatever service it is that you want to export your photo to and show it off. So, Reed, I really hope that helps. I hope that you have a great trip, and I can't wait to see some of those photos. Be sure to share those with us when you get back. All right. Our next question is a voicemail that comes from Brian. Brian is he was a beta member of the new Beginner Photography podcast community and is a member of the Coach Capture Critique Collective. So let's hear what Brian has to say.
Hi, Raymond. My name is Brian Bull. First off, to start, your podcast has been a tremendous help for me in my beginnings of my photography adventure and now coming into a photography career. I've shot weddings and concerts and some portrait sessions and really finding what I enjoy. With that as well, though, I find that even though I really know and understand the exposure triangle, when I'm often in the moment of, the heat of a wedding, the heat of a concert, or even just enjoying a portrait session, I get distracted and I don't seem to change my settings. And then I get back and upload into my computer and find that I recognized I should have lowered or upped my, shutter speed, lowered up my ISO, lowered up my f-stops. Are there any recommendations you have in kind of learning how to do that more on the fly? Or would you say this is just something that comes with time and practice and everything like that? I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you very much for everything you do, and I hope you take care.
All right, Brian. So first of all, awesome to hear from you. I love this question because I know that a lot of people are going through the similar thing. I know I sure did. In fact, the first probably 2, maybe 3 weddings that I shot in aperture priority because of that exact situation that you're talking about. I didn't want to find myself in a situation where lighting had changed so much that I didn't change my camera settings appropriately because I just wasn't as familiar as I should have been with the camera before taking on a job like that. So in part to answer your question, yes, it does come through exercise or practice rather, and time. You will get better with it, as well as shooting with something like a mirrorless camera where you can preview the exposure within the viewfinder will help because, well, now you can see whether or not the photo is too bright or too dark while you're taking the photo. But now that I think about it, I don't think that you specifically set it based on exposure. So, it could be that you're referring to creative choices. Maybe you should have had a faster shutter speed to capture this action, or a lower aperture to change the depth of field and capture exactly what it was that you wanted. But either of those cases, yes, practice, time will definitely help. And if you're looking for practice, the best way to do that, right, because we don't always have access to a bride that we can just walk around and follow and shoot, I think, is to either follow around a pet or a child or something similar, because they are all over the place, right? They're inside, they're outside, they're low to the ground, they're climbing on things, they're all over. So if you don't tell them what to do, which is impossible anyway, to tell a pet or a child what to do, then and you just follow them around, you are going to put yourself in a situation where, oh man, now they're outside. I got to change my settings real quick so that I can expose this properly. Oh, now they're low to the ground. I got to change my aperture because I want this photo to be whatever this toy it is that they're looking at on the ground is in focus, but they're not in focus. Oh, now they're jumping off something. I want to change my shutter speed to make it look like, whoa, that's a lot of motion as they're jumping off of something. If anything that is not random, but anything that is moving around a lot and you can't control and just gets in different situations is going to be helpful to get that practice, not only in terms of your settings, but also things like composition and lighting. Because now, wherever they are, if you're looking through the viewfinder, you're going to be able to see, oh man, if I just kind of move a little bit to the left or a little bit higher, that, I don't know, window behind them kind of frames them nicely. I really like that shot. Or wow, I didn't even think that this could be a silhouette type photo, but I can go ahead and try to achieve that in this situation right here. So not only is it going to help you with those settings, not only is it going to help you be more familiar with the camera, but it's also going to help you with the other elements of the photo, such as the composition, the lighting, and a moment as well. So I encourage you to do that. Again, if you have a pet, if you have a child, just follow them around. That's wonderful. If not, it may be a little bit more difficult, but maybe you have a niece or nephew that you could follow around, or a friend who has an animal. There's dogs all over the place. I'd be willing to bet that you could just go to a dog park and people would just think that one of those dogs there is yours, and then you could just photograph a dog outside or whatever, and then that should, do a similar thing for you. So obviously it's really important to know how your camera works and know what it is that you're going for, right? We have that creative vision, but the thing that's holding us back is the tool itself. So the better that you can use the tool and understand how it works, the camera, the better you're going to be going forward in capturing the images that it is that you want to capture. So Brian, I hope that helps. I encourage you to get that practice. That's one of the reasons why I know that you joined the Coach Capture Critique Collective, is so that you can be put in those situations where you are going to be encouraged to get that practice so that you can grow your skills and become that better photographer that you want to be and more confident while you're out shooting. So Brian, again, I hope that answers your question. All right, let's go ahead and move on to an email that I got from Laura. Laura says, I am wondering if you might have advice for the next step for me. I have a Nikon D5200 that I've used for about 12 years. My Tamron 18 to 270, which is an f3.5 to 6.3 lens, is almost always on my camera. I'm just a mom that likes to capture moments and events. My favorite is on the football sidelines as my husband coaches and I got 2 players. So I got 2 questions. Which camera would be the next logical step up? I'm not looking to go pro or gain jobs. I just want to get better and better. I don't want to spend unnecessary money, and I also don't want to get something new and feel like it's not really much different than before. I hear that. And 2, would it make sense to just start with upgrading my lens to an actual Nikon product? The review of the lens I have are just okay. It's not amazing. It's not disappointing. I do have a Nikon Nifty 50 and I love it, but I don't use it a lot. And it seems to take better photos than my Tamron. But maybe I'm just imagining that because I know that it's a brand difference. And then I guess last question would be teleconverters. Are they worth it? All right. So Laura, wow, lots to dig into here. Lots of gear stuff, lots of personal questions. So I guess the first question that I would have for you in terms of what is that next step would be, since you have a D5200, what is it that you're not happy about? Is there some element of the camera that just isn't doing it for you any longer, or are you just looking to upgrade because you would like to simply upgrade? Either of those options are totally fine. I just want to know what it is to, I guess, give you a better answer. But I will start off by saying that, as you said, you've had the D5200 for 12 years, and there have been several cameras that have come out since then, believe it or not. So there's several camera grades that Nikon has. There's a entry-level, enthusiast, and pro level type cameras, right? So if you were to upgrade and you want a camera that is better, obviously in many ways, but is different enough to where it's going to feel like it's not just the same camera as before, I wouldn't recommend that you just get the one version up. I would recommend that you go several versions ahead, because there's really going to make some big advancements over time, not only in terms of build quality and features, but also just in the sensor technology and how it captures light. So to answer your question, if you are fine with the camera that you have, but you're just looking for something a little newer, a little better, then the D5600 came out in 2016, and that is one camera sensor generation newer. So it's going to be better at picking up light and color than your D5200, but it's still the same grade of camera, which is just an entry-level camera. So it's mostly made out of plastic. If you drop it, it's probably going to break, things like that. Whereas another option would be a Nikon D7200. So that came out in 2015, which is when you're older than the D5600, but it has the same grade of sensor inside, so it's still newer than your D5200, but it's also one camera grade higher because it's made for enthusiasts rather than just entry-level cameras. If you've been shooting for 12 years, I don't see any reason why you should have an entry-level camera. I would consider you an enthusiast. You're not a pro, but you definitely would appreciate the features of an enthusiast-level camera over a beginner-level camera. And that is a larger body, so it's more comfortable to hold. There's a lot more features, as well as a good portion of the camera. There's probably some weather sealing included in it, as well as some more metal parts inside of the body of the camera. So if you were to drop it, it's going to fare way better than your entry-level camera. And just FYI, I had checked KEH cameras before, recording right now, and it looks like they're going for about $500 used, and that's on KEH, which is a secondhand reseller. So it's a used camera, but KEH does an amazing job at selling used cameras. I mean, they're the experts. So I would buy it with confidence, and at $500, that means that if you were to look on Facebook Marketplace or something, I'd be willing to bet that you could find one for maybe $400 in the same grade, in the same level of usedness, in the same quality as you would get from KEH. But that's up to you. If you buy it from KEH, then you're going to get a warranty. I believe it's a 30-day warranty. If you buy it on Facebook Marketplace, you could get totally screwed. It's happened to me before. So not with a camera, but that's another story. So yeah, that's an option that you can consider. But if you are wanting something even newer than that, because 2015 is now 8 years old, and that only gives you a few years before you're in the exact same boat where you're at now. You could get the D7500, which came out in 2017. So that is 2 generations of sensors newer. And that is going to give you a big boost in quality of your image, because a lot more latitude in terms of the light that it can gather, and it is still that one camera grade higher. It's made for enthusiasts. So the D7500 is Nikon's best crop sensor camera, I think, that came out. So if you're looking for a DSLR, you're not wanting to spend a bunch of money on something that is mirrorless, then I would encourage you to look at the D7500, because it just in how much forward it has come since the D7200, and it's going to give you all those things that you're looking for. It's really going to feel like a noticeable upgrade without being a huge investment. So I hope that helps. Next question that you had was about the lens that you have. Would it make sense to start with upgrading my lens to an actual Nikon lens? So I don't think that Nikon makes anything similar to an 18 to 270, but one of the reasons why your Nikon branded 50mm lens looks better than your Tamron 18 to 270 is mainly because, one, you can have a larger aperture, which gives you that separation that you're looking for. On that Tamron, the 3.5 to f6.3, it doesn't open up very far, and it takes a lot in ideal conditions for an image to look professional grade and have that beautiful out of focus background. But also, a prime lens is just naturally going to be sharper than a zoom lens, because the optical elements inside don't have to move and potentially shift just a little bit out of focus. So that is why your 50mm is going to look better. It's not necessarily just because it's a Nikon. But if there's another lens that you're thinking of, I would encourage you to check it out. But I would ask yourself, like, what is it that you're not happy with about the Tamron? If it's just the sharpness, then I'm sure that there's newer versions of that Tamron lens or a similar Tamron lens that will have better glass quality and will be sharper without having to go Nikon. I would encourage you to go Nikon just because brand bodies and brand lenses just work better together all the time. Autofocus is typically a bit faster. But again, I don't think that they have anything in that range. So if you find yourself mostly between 18 and, 120, I'd be willing to bet that Nikon has something in that range. But if you're going further than that, up to the 270, but also down to the 18, then you're really limited in the options that you could get. So that kind of brings you to your last question here, which is teleconverters. Because if you have a lens that's say 18 to 120 and you get yourself a 2x teleconverter, well, now you can have a lot more flexibility with just one lens at a considerable discount over buying a lens with such a large range like that. So are they worth it? I don't know. I don't typically use teleconverters in my own work, but more importantly, I don't know exactly how you work and the images that you want. I'm assuming that if you're shooting up to 270 and you're asking about teleconverters, you probably want a lot of reach. So I would just encourage you to rent a teleconverter. They have them. You can get one from cameralensrentals.com. They have it for Nikon. Extremely affordably priced for, to rent it for a few days, a week. I think it's like $50, maybe less than that. So give it a shot. See if it works within the way that you shoot and your photographic workflow, and then go from there. I hope that helps. All right, next question here we got from Steven. Steven sent me an email. He says, "Hey Raymond, I want to thank you for all the great work you do for the photography community." Thank you, Steven. I am Steven from Australia, and I started listening to the podcast in April of 2023, and I love it. My question is, what is the best way to figure out what kind of photography I want to do? I feel a bit lost at the moment. I know I love photography, and I'm very passionate about it, and I want it as a career, but I'm just lost as far as which path I want to go. Here in Sydney, I worked for a successful wedding photographer for 4 months, but I ended up leaving that job as I didn't agree with his approach and style, so that has since put me off from wedding photography. I totally get that. There are a lot of different approaches to wedding photography, and some of them work for you and some of them do not. And if it does not, it can very easily turn you off from that. So to answer your question, what's the best way to figure out what kind of photography you want to do? The answer is shoot more. That's it. I could tell you that pet photography is one of the most profitable genres of photography. I could tell you that family photography is great for a reoccurring source of revenue, because families are going to have to update their photos every year. I could tell you that corporate headshots bring in, a good bit and don't require you to do much posing because it's essentially the same pose, mostly over and over again. Or I could tell you that wedding photography offers a lot more time freedom during the week. You would just have to do it different than that other photographer. Or I could tell you that commercial photography could have you flying all over the world to take amazing photos. But I don't know what your ideal lifestyle, your ideal income, your ideal workload is. So I can't answer that for you. So because there's no way to know all the ins and outs of a genre and all those little intricacies of the business side of things, the only way to find those out, and subsequently which one is right for you, is simply to shoot more. So I would encourage you to try a bunch of things. Try corporate headshots, try family photos, try pet photography, try commercial photography, try to get back into weddings. See which one you like best, but you have to give it an honest try. You can't just do it once or twice and be like, oh no, this isn't for me. You have to do it to the point to where you know that you're doing it right. Now, is it right for you? And then when you can confidently answer that question, then there's your answer right there. I can tell you that there were several genres of photography I thought that I had no interest in whatsoever. But after, giving them a shot, I did like them. Now, I ultimately pursued wedding photography as a business because I valued that time freedom during the week. But maybe for you, you want the momentum and you want to keep going and you want to be shooting 5-6 days a week and have somebody else deal with the business side of things. And that's fine. But the only way to figure that out is shoot more so that you can figure out which one is right for you. So I hope that helps. I know that it's not a particularly pragmatic answer, I suppose, but photography is not very pragmatic on its own. It requires a level of personal introspection to figure out what it is that you're trying to say, I guess, in a photo. So again, Stephen, I really hope that helped and guide you towards finding what it is that you want to shoot. Okay, next question that we got is an email from John. Let's see. John says to upgrade or not to upgrade. That is the question. First off, I want to let you know that I am loving the show. Thanks, John. I'm only 8 episodes in and I'm already engrossed. Gross. In those early episodes, you speak a lot about how gear doesn't matter. However, the earliest Nikon you seem to refer to is the D3200. And you sound amazed whenever you come across a good picture taken with one. I inherited a D3000. I understand the exposure triangle and the math behind it and can apply it in manual mode. However, in anything other than ideal lighting, I feel like I'm fighting the camera. The max ISO on the D3000 is 1600, and sometimes even that's not enough and introduces a heavy amount of grain. Would you advise trying a prime lens to take advantage of the wider aperture, or is it simply that my body is too outdated to do what I'm trying to achieve? I haven't yet settled on a style as such and am trying to keep my options open when it comes to subject matter, but it doesn't seem to matter what sort of picture I'm taking. As soon as it gets a bit dark, my camera struggles. Yeah. So, John, first of all, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you are going all the way through from start to finish, I hope that you enjoy listening to this 4 years after I recorded it. So let me try to answer this question with the information that is currently available to us. The D3000, let's see, where to start? I guess first, let's tackle you said that, or is it simply that my body is too outdated to do what I'm trying to achieve? I guess I'm not sure what it is that you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to shoot at nighttime, yeah, your body is too outdated. If you're trying to achieve, I don't know, shooting golden hour or shooting high contrast type photos, well, maybe you just need to, maybe you do need to change your lens. Maybe you do need to figure out a way around that. But since you haven't settled on a style and genre of photography that you really want to get into, I would encourage you to hold on to the D3000, because holding on to that D3000 until here's the thing. If you bought a new camera today and you went to go try to figure out what is your style, what is it that you want to shoot, by the time you figure that out, the camera that you have might not be the right camera for your style or the genre that you're shooting. Maybe you pick a camera with a really high megapixels, and a full frame sensor, but really you like shooting wildlife, and that's not what you want. You're going to want a crop sensor camera so that you get that additional reach from your lenses. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier with Steven, is that it takes a level of shooting more to figure out what it is that you want to shoot. But if you bought that new camera now and figured out that your style is different than what is right for your camera, then you're going to have to upgrade again anyway. So you might as well hold on to that D3000 as long as you possibly can before upgrading. And at that time, when I say as long as you possibly can, I would say that it's definitely time to upgrade. Nobody would fault you for upgrading the D3000, which I think came out in actually, I can tell you right now, D3000 came out in 2009. Yeah, so nobody's going to fault you for that. But I would just encourage you to have some sort of an idea of what it is that you want to shoot, so that you can make a decision on what is the right camera for you. It also might be that you take this hindrance of having low ISO performance and use that to get into flash photography. Off-camera flash, on-camera flash, bouncing the flash, using it for portraits, using it to control your light so that you don't have to shoot in less than ideal conditions. You can create your own ideal conditions. And when shooting with a flash, there's so much quantity of light that can come out of a flash that, you could shoot at ISO 400 for the majority of photos that you shoot. The photos that you shoot today at 1600 that have a lot of grain in them, you could shoot at ISO 200 because you're introducing flash, and that flash is giving you that additional, 3 stops of light. Oh yeah, easily. You could shoot at 100, which is just a 4-stop difference. So I would use this crutch that you have right now as an advantage to learn new tools so that, again, when the time comes, you're going to have more information to buy the right camera for you. But once you figure out, I think that I like this style, then yeah, go ahead and get yourself a new camera and enjoy the ride, my friend. So again, I hope that helps. I would still, for you, probably take the same recommendations that I gave Laura earlier, because all those cameras are still good recommendations unless you want to go full frame, and in which case you can do so. And by the time you know what camera or what it is that you're going to be shooting, you'll know what camera is going to work for that. So all right, next question that I got here is another email from Lisa. Lisa says, first of all, thank you so much for the podcast. You are welcome, Lisa. I recently found it and have been learning a lot. I'm feeling like I'm stuck in this photography rut and I haven't been able to improve. Landscape photography is the biggest challenge for me, and I listened to episode 376 with Jim Nix. That was a great episode. You guys mentioned that HDR is pretty dated now. I was wondering what landscape photographers are doing now instead. I recently purchased a Canon R5 and am still learning how to use it. I've taken the camera with me on trips and struggle to get any shots that I'm proud of. I'm trying to shoot sunsets over the Sierra Nevadas with a dog in the foreground. I usually just underexpose for the sky and try to edit/lighten it up, but it looks really flat and dull. I'm curious what I'm doing wrong and how to fix the photos. Thanks so much. Yeah, Lisa, great question. You're not alone. Let me clarify. HDR is still done, but it's just done in a very different way. All right. So landscape photographers are still capturing multiple exposures, but because camera sensors have become much greater and are able to capture so much more latitude now than they were before, it's just not needed as much or in the same way that it was back in the day. So latitude is how much of a difference there is between the brightest brights and the darkest darks without going full white and full black. So I would say that a camera back in the day, let's say, for example, when you went to edit it, on top of that, editing programs are also much more efficient as well. So it's just like kind of everything has gotten better. But back in the day, with the programs that we had, with the sensors that we had, you could probably only save about 2.5 stops of shadow detail in editing. And that was really like even with the RAW. Whereas today, I mean, you can save more than 5, like I was saying earlier, when it came to editing just a JPEG image. So you can definitely do that with a RAW file. So you can just achieve more with a RAW file, which reduces the need to capture multiple exposures for most situations. However, in a situation where you are shooting something that is incredibly bright with something that's in the shadow, it can definitely help out. So again, before you would take, say, 5 or 7 photos, plug them into some sort of program, and then it would take care of the blending of the images, and then you would just simply use a slider to make it more HDR-y or less HDR-y. I'm going to coin that term, HDR-y, the HDR-like, right? So today, because files are better, image files are better, because editing programs are better, because sensors are better, you would just bring in less images into Photoshop. And because, again, those raw files are better, you just have more control via masking. So you can control what areas you want greater shadow or highlight detail to come through. So there is a level of editing that still needs done, and there's still a need for shooting multiple exposures to increase the dynamic range to get a higher amount of dynamic range, but it's just not done in the same way that it was. So let's take your example, right? A sunset, incredibly bright compared to your pup, which is obviously in the shadow because the sun is going to be behind them. That right there is a huge difference in exposure. So too much so that however much latitude your camera has is obviously able to handle it somewhat because you're able to raise up the shadows enough. However, it just looks kind of dull. But the thing is because that difference is so much, and because we as people, our brains know that when you're looking at a sunset, everything else is kind of silhouetted. It's hard to make that shot look natural without any additional help. It's hard to raise up the shadows and bring the exposure up as if the dog was actually in bright sun and make it look, again, natural. In that situation, you would ideally use flash to expose the dog, to bring out and even the exposure between the sunset and the dog itself. So when it comes to being able to edit and being flexible with your image files, that's all great, but nothing is going to replace the quality of light that you can get by getting it right there. Quantity of light is not the same as quality of light. And I hope that makes sense. All right, let's see. We got our last question here. We're going to go ahead and take from Tom, who also sent in an email. Remember, guys, if you send in voicemails, it is phenomenal, and I like to hear you, and it also gives me a break to be able to take a drink of water without having to continue to speak and just destroy my vocal cords. So send in those voicemails. Don't be shy. I'd love to hear from you. So Tom says, I got a question about a project I'm working on. He says, I have been reluctant to ask this here because this is not exactly a beginner question, but I'm not sure what else to ask. I'm working on a photo project that I would eventually like to try to get a show with at a coffee shop or local small gallery. And with some luck, turn it into a photo book. The project is showing the human emotional side of dog rescue. I'm stuck trying to figure out how to show my photos to make the biggest impact. I plan on any proceeds going back to the rescue groups in my community. So I guess my question is, how and where do I start to organize a showing? Okay, so first, I love this idea, and I'm so happy that you did reach out to me, Tom, and that you didn't just suffer there in silence. But first, I would encourage you to go through this, because even though it is difficult to figure out how you're going to make this work, it sounds like it is really, really important to you, and something that you have the ability to help with. And that's just a cool feeling. That's one of my favorite things in photography, is that you can use this tool as a way to help others. And that is just so fun. So again, I really love this idea, and I'm definitely going to help you out. So how and where do you start to organize an event to make an impact? I think that I would look at this as not just a one-time thing. This is clearly important to you. Dogs are always going to need some sort of rescue side, some sort of help. So I wouldn't look at this as like, oh, I'd like to just have one gallery or put it in one coffee shop and hope for the best. Imagine this as like a really long-term project, something that you're going to be working on for years, possibly. And that means that rather than trying to make the most out of this one show and make the biggest impact with your images, focus on putting in the reps rather than just getting a quick win. Because when you put in the reps, then you get that momentum going. The momentum is what is going to help you move forward. It's going to help you get more ideas, adjust, and then make more of an impact. You'll be able to make more of an impact on the people who make an impact on the dogs. And then that is a win-win. Doing it just once might make an impact on them, but it also might not. So don't think about this as this one-time thing. Think about it as something that you're going to be working on for a long, long, long time. So again, where to start to organize a showing? Well, to have a showing, you're going to want to be in a place where dog lovers are. That's pretty important. So I know that you mentioned a coffee shop, but maybe try to find a coffee shop that's next to a dog park. What's the coffee shop that dog walkers go to? Are there any locally owned pet supply stores? Maybe you could reach out to them and say like, hey, I'd love to provide some photos for your wall. They're available for sale, and all the proceeds go back to our community rescue foundations for animals. Maybe you could find a local shelter and ask them if they're participating in any events that you might also be able to participate in. Because if they're going to be there, obviously it's important to them. They've said that it will work for them. And now you can get on top of that as well and be a part of that. And you can help them out. You can get photos for their social channels. You can get photos for them to put on their website. You can get photos for them to use in their marketing so that they can also make more of an impact, right? It's not about always making an impact with your images, even though that's great. Sometimes it's about helping others to make an impact through your images, right? Because if they've been doing it for a while, your images can help them to make more of an impact as well. And that's no less noble than having your photos directly be the thing that creates this change. Maybe you can get a booth at a local farmer's market. Every time I go to a farmer's market, people have their dogs out there. Who else is out there? Typically people with some discretionary income go to farmer's market. So those are going to be the people who will more than likely be the people who would be willing to help, the people who would be willing to get involved into this cause. If there is a local gallery, maybe you could reach out to them and just see what their thoughts are. And if they say, I don't know if you're right for this yet, ask them what possibly, if they have any ideas that could, where they could go, where they could do this, where they might be able to make an impact. Maybe there's Facebook groups for dog lovers in your community, and try to find out, where do they go? Is there a shop that they all love? Is there a park that they all love to go to? Something like that, right? It's just getting in front of those people. And again, more than just a one-time thing, because if it's just a one-time thing, man, that is such a huge undertaking that it may burn you out, and that's not what you want. So focus on the small wins and just keep iterating and do bigger things. That way, you know that you will work best. You know what does work best because you're making small changes, and you're going to try a bunch of different things, and then you'll be able to do more of what feels right, and then subsequently make more of an impact and get the help for the animals in the shelter in your community there. So, Tom, I really hope that helped. I hope that you find that helpful. I hope that you put that into practice, and I would love to hear from you on what it is that you decide to do and move forward with.